While publisher Exile has tried to distance themselves and claim that Exiles End is not a Metroidvania-style game, the similarities are too numerous to ignore. Progression of the game's map to new areas is typically blocked off until a specific item or ability is acquired, often gated by a difficult platforming encounter or mini-boss. Backtracking to previously explored areas with the new ability and/or gadget to progress the story is a staple of the genre, and that is where Exile's End squarely finds itself, despite Exile's insistence that this is instead a cinematic platformer. The map in Exile's End, a vital tool in any Metroidvania, performs the most basic of functions, without any of the advantages made by games like Axiom Verge, one of the premier Metroidvania titles of this generation. At a quick glance, there's no helpful way to determine where one area of the world ends and another begins, except for the same type of marking that designates a doorway that hasn't been passed through yet. Getting lost is another issue that plagues Exile's End, as the aforementioned map has no orientation or quest markers, so unless you can recall what happened moments ago and can recall what the current objective is, it's incredibly easy to get lost. Even worse, while knowing precisely what my objective was and scouring every inch of the navigable map space, the lack of any markers caused me to spend well over an hour running around lost with no idea where my objective was. Perhaps my biggest grievance I have with Exile's End is its saving mechanic. Whereas in other games of the genre, there are typically designated save points that a player needs to trek back to without getting killed in the process. In Exile's End, however, progress is saved immediately upon leaving a room. While this might seem like a great feature, especially when you take into account just how often death can come at you, there is a hidden danger with these instant saves. Suppose while on your journey, you take a substantial amount of damage, but not enough to kill you, and you mindlessly wander into the next room. Unless you have one of the extremely limited health packs in your inventory, your life bar is as high as it's going to get until you're lucky enough to fell an enemy that drops a small amount of health. I was unfortunate enough to experience this particular phenomenon several times during my playthrough, often leading to long bouts of frustration. I ended a few frantic firefights with only a sliver of my health remaining and proceeded to get saved in a state of permanent near death. The first enemy to get the drop on me would kill me instantly, as would any environmental hazards I happened across, such as low-hanging ceiling spikes over a shallow jump. Another issue with the save mechanic is even worse, though less prevalent in my time with the game. Early on, when first navigating the forest map, there is a puzzle that requires the player to toss a rock at an out-of-reach lever to open a door to then progress the story. Thanks to my, at the time, unfamiliarity with the puzzle elements of the game, I entered this particular room without the aforementioned rock in hand. As I learned the hard way, this particular rock doesn't respawn if you go back to the previous room, and there I stood with no way to progress the story. I had to start over. This happened a second time, with the same puzzle, but this time I threw the rock at the intended lever, and instead of opening the door, the rock landed just pixels away from its intended target, causing me to enter another fail state. The rock was out of reach, and I couldn't obtain another one. Another restart. Exile's End isn't all bad though. The story is compelling and tells of hero Jameson on his journey to a remote mining planet to find the missing son of the president of a galaxy-wide megacorporation, Ravenwood, which starts off as a simple search and recovery mission turns out to be far more complicated than Jameson and his team could have ever imagined. For the absolute hardcore fans of the genre, there are 3 additional modes of play. Survival mode, in which players must defeat a timed onslaught of enemies in a series of unique maps, earning points based on performance which they can then be used to purchase upgrades along the way. Speedrun mode, where all cutscenes are disabled and players have 1 life to try beating their fastest time through the game. And hard mode, where saving is disabled and death spells game over. Both speedrun and hard mode are unlocked only after beating the game at least once. I do wish I had more pleasant points to make about the game, but I spent the majority of my time wandering around aimlessly or in a state of frustration due to a poorly timed autosave. The game is pretty to look at and the visual style harkens back to the SNES era with a mix of 16-bit pixel art and what I would best describe as a moving mosaic. Add to that the extreme difficulty spikes, and Exile's End seems to fit with the overall nostalgia feel that the game appears to be trying to call upon. Perhaps for a more seasoned veteran of the genre, or on a second playthrough, as there are multiple endings if the trophy list is to be believed, I would have had a better outlook. Knowing what I know about the level design, the saves, and other important mechanics, I can see a second playthrough going much smoother. Exile's End doesn't do anything to reinvent the wheel, but by straying away from the shape that makes a wheel work in the first place, it's hard to recommend the game that plays like a car driving on squares, to anyone looking to fill that Metroid void in their gaming library. When all is said and done, we give Exiles End a 6 out of 10.